Samuel Reed had asked 11 men for work in 3 weeks, and 11 had told him no. He'd learned to stop saying what he used to do. Saying commissary clerk made men's faces go careful, like they were deciding how to be polite about turning him down. So he asked for work instead, any work, and let the rest stay folded in his coat pocket. His money was thin enough, now that another week of nothing wasn't a thing he could treat lightly. Shoshone was loud with railroad traffic and dust. Bennett Eating House sat 2 streets back from the depot. Louisa Bennett stood at the service counter, checking a supplier's note, a pencil stub in her hand. Behind her, Agnes Doyle ruled the kitchen, and a young woman named Minnie Lyle carried plates through the back passage like she'd been born to it. The door opened. A man stepped in with his hat already off, a small valise in one hand, tired around the eyes, standing like someone used to being looked over. "Ma'am," he said, "wondering if you've got any honest work needs doing." "What kind?" "Any kind. Wood, water, washing, carrying." Louisa studied him the way she studied a delivery she wasn't sure about yet. And if I haven't?" He didn't flinch at that. "Then I'll ask down the street. I just need food and a place to sleep." He said it simply, like a fact about the weather, not a plea. Louisa set the pencil down. She didn't offer him charity, and she told him so straight out, the way she told a supplier when a price wasn't fair. If he worked, she paid him. 3 days a trial to see how he handled himself. Meals through the term. The small room off the back passage, the one with just enough space for a cot, his to use while he earned it. Ordinary backhouse work. Nothing fine. Nothing that required trust she hadn't earned yet. "Fair enough," Samuel said, and didn't ask for anything more than that. He started that same afternoon, hauling wood, hauling water, scrubbing pots. Agnes shoved his way without comment. He didn't act insulted by any of it. He didn't wander into the kitchen uninvited, and Agnes noticed that before she said a word to anyone about him. Minnie noticed he remembered where things belonged after being told once, and never made her explain the same thing twice, which was more than she could say for most men who came through looking for a few days' work. By the second afternoon, nobody had to point him toward the next task. He found it himself, finished it, and found the one after that. Louisa noticed she didn't have to check on him every 20 minutes, which was its own kind of relief she hadn't realized she'd been missing. 2 days in, a delivery came during the noon rush, crates of dry goods stacked at the back door. Samuel asked, almost without thinking, how many suppers Louisa usually served between 6 and 8, and whether this delivery was sized for today or for something bigger coming. Louisa looked up from the crate she was counting. That wasn't a question a man hauling wood usually thought to ask. Samuel caught the look and went quiet, like he'd said more than he meant to. He went back to stacking crates, but the question sat there between them, small and unexplained. She tested him with the next delivery, asked him to check the count against the supplier's slip himself. He found a short count in 10 minutes. Nothing dramatic, just an honest mistake somewhere between the wagon and the door, and told her straight out instead of making a show of it. Louisa sorted it out with the supplier herself and gave him the next count too, and the one after that, without being asked twice. That evening, with the day's work already finished, and no reason left to keep talking, Louisa asked where he'd worked before Shoshone. "Railroad camps," Samuel said. "Construction side." He didn't say more than that. She didn't push. She told him Bennett Eating House had been hers 4 years now, and neither of them needed to keep standing there once the telling was done. They kept talking anyway, a few minutes longer than the conversation required, about nothing in particular. Louisa couldn't have said, walking away from the counter that night, why she remembered it. Nothing had been decided. Nothing had been said that mattered to the business at all. She just found she was still thinking about it later, which wasn't a thing that usually happened with a hired hand 3 days into a trial. The trouble started the way trouble in a working kitchen usually does, with a good idea applied in the wrong place. Samuel had watched the rear passage long enough to see dirty ware and incoming supplies, and moving staff all crossing the same narrow strip of floor, and he shifted the wash station 3 feet to open a cleaner path. He didn't ask first. For an hour it looked like an improvement. The crossing eased, the traffic ran smoother, and he let himself feel briefly pleased with it. Then Minnie came through with an ordinary load and found her usual route blocked, and had to carry it the long way around at exactly the hour it mattered least to be slow. Nothing broke, nobody was hurt. But it was a real cost, small and avoidable, and Louisa found him before the supper rush was over. She told him flat out why that route couldn't close. Deliveries, fuel, water, all threaded through it at a particular hour every day, a rhythm he hadn't been here long enough to know. Samuel didn't argue that it had worked fine at camp. He said only that he hadn't known that part of her house. What cannot move?" he asked her. Louisa found herself explaining the whole rhythm of her mornings, more than she had meant to. He put the route back and rebuilt his arrangement around it instead of through it, and by the next day's service, it worked. Louisa left the arrangement in place, and Samuel understood the answer without needing her to say it. The 3-day trial was nearly up when Louisa reviewed the work with him, no more than the facts of it, the way she reviewed any account. He'd expected nothing past the agreed term. She told him the 3 days had been worth paying for, no more sentiment in it than that, and asked if he'd found other work yet. "Not yet," he said. She didn't ask him to stay. She was still deciding what she thought about that herself when Edwin Marsh came through the door with a proposition that changed the shape of the week. A traveler party heading to Shoshone Falls needed supper for 24, on top of Louisa's regular trade, on a set evening not far off. It would be the busiest supper Bennett Eating House had yet attempted. Edwin needed a clear answer, not hope. Louisa didn't ask Samuel first. She checked with Agnes on what the kitchen could carry. Checked her tables, her ordinary customers, her supply. Then she said yes. For the reputation of it, the referrals it might bring, the proof that Bennett Eating House could grow past what it already was. Not because she had to, because she wanted to see if she could. When she told the staff, Samuel's questions came fast and exact. Head count, arrival time, whether the party ate together, how that compared to an ordinary night, how much clean ware she'd need, how many hands. Louisa asked why those questions mattered so much to him. "Camp work makes a man mind his numbers," he said, and didn't go further than that. She extended his trial through the big supper, restated the same fair terms. Wage meals, the small room, a clear end, and made clear his growing duties would be paid duties, not favors. Then she asked him to help her count exactly what the night would need. They leaned over a ledger together, heads close, counting out loud. Over the days that followed, Samuel stopped assuming his instincts were enough on their own. He studied Louisa's rhythms, Agnes's timing, Minnie's route, the supplier's habits, before he suggested anything at all. Watching longer than he used to, before he'd trust himself to change a single thing. He'd learned that lesson once already, and it had stuck. Edwin returned with the party's details, and one question Samuel asked about seating made Edwin look at him twice. Were you in hotel work?" Edwin asked. "No," Samuel said. Louisa was close enough to hear. She turned to him fully, the way you turn to someone you've decided to stop half listening to. Then what kind of railroad work put those questions in your head?" There was no room left to dodge it gently. Samuel told her. He'd been a commissary clerk for a railroad contractor, counted provisions, tracked what came in and went out, kept camp head counts straight, made sure 100 men or more got fed on schedule when the work was hardest, in weather that didn't wait on anyone. He remembered one winter when the supply wagon broke an axle 2 days out, and he'd had to stretch 3 days of flour into 5 without anyone in camp going hungry enough to complain about it. Not a manager, not an engineer. Just the man who kept the numbers honest when nobody else had time to. Louisa asked why he hadn't said so the day he walked in. After enough men tell you there's no opening for that, Samuel said, you stop leading with it. You learn to ask smaller. Louisa let it sit a moment, and something in how she looked at him afterward had shifted. Not surprise exactly. More like a picture coming into focus after being blurred the whole time. She didn't hand him the whole operation. She drew the lines clearly. Samuel would take the count, the receiving, the helper sequence, the table turnover, the timing. Agnes kept the kitchen, full authority, no question. Louisa kept the customers, the prices, the suppliers, the final word on everything. His pay would reflect the wider duty. He agreed without arguing a single line of it. Later, with the practical business settled, Louisa asked if someone offered him real commissary work again. The kind he used to do, would he take it? If it's real and the terms are clear, Samuel said. Then he asked her something back. Did she actually want Bennett Eating House to become a regular stop for the bigger parties? Or was this once enough? If I can do it without going careless on my regulars, she said. Yes. The evening's count was already finished, and neither of them moved from the counter. Louisa asked, not about the restaurant, what he missed eating from the camps, if anything, that her kitchen didn't serve. Samuel thought about it longer than the question seemed to need, then named something small and ordinary, a dish tied to one particular cold morning with one particular crew, nothing grand about it. He didn't turn it into a story. He just answered her. Then he asked what she'd put on her menu if she never had to think about the cost of it. Fresh peaches, she said, when they're good enough to be worth the trouble. Samuel's mouth softened. That sounds like an expensive answer. You asked me not to think about cost, so I did. The ease of it surprised her more than the answer had. Samuel looked down at the closed ledger as if he had nearly forgotten it was there. Peaches then, he said. Only if somebody else is paying. That got the smallest laugh out of him. Louisa heard it and found herself smiling before she had decided whether she meant to. Agnes gave him one more lesson, without meaning it kindly. Samuel proposed a sequence that would have crowded one kitchen step too tight. Agnes said no, flat, and told him exactly what her stoves could carry without the food going soft or slow. He revised his plan around her limit instead of past it. Louisa watched him take it without bruised pride, the same way he'd once taken her correction about the rear route. Minnie's route needed adjusting too. A path that looked efficient on paper turned out clumsy for a person actually carrying a full tray. Samuel fixed it after watching her carry one load through it herself. Owen Morrow, a local freight man, came by with a shipment and watched Samuel reconcile a count without mixing up the restaurant's usual stock and the traveler party's allotment. Sorting both out clean, in a fraction of the time it would have taken most men. He asked where a man learned that kind of care. Samuel told him straight. Owen didn't offer anything yet. He just listened and remembered, the way a man remembers a name worth keeping for later. The night before the big supper, with the last count finished and Agnes and Minnie already gone home, Louisa noticed Samuel didn't ask, "What work have you got anymore?" He said, "Tomorrow we'll need," like a man speaking from inside the work instead of outside it. She noticed she trusted him enough now to disagree with him, without taking the responsibility back. There was a kind of quiet between them that didn't need filling. The day of the supper, the restaurant moved with a controlled kind of pressure. Everyone had their piece of it memorized. Samuel checked his helper movements twice, more out of habit than doubt. Then Edwin arrived with a change nobody had planned for. 6 more travelers had joined the party overnight. 24 had become 30. He needed to know, now whether Louisa could still take them. Samuel didn't answer for her. Agnes gave her kitchen's real limit. Samuel gave the operational cost of the increase, straight, no softening it. Louisa did the math in her head, fast, and said yes. Before touching a single arrangement, Samuel asked Louisa and Agnes the same question he'd learned once already. What cannot move? She answered fast this time without having to think. She trusted, now, that he'd actually listened to the answer instead of working around it. He rebuilt the sequence around what she told him, quietly, without needing to be watched doing it. The first part of supper held. Not perfect, nothing that size ever is, but it held. Regular tables got their food only a little slower than usual. Agnes kept the food steady, plate after plate going out the pass without a break in the rhythm. Samuel kept his eyes on the empty chairs, the cleanware, and the lines still waiting at the door. Then the extra 6 caught up with them. Dirty ware came back faster than cleanware could be ready. Steam and noise thickened in the narrow rear passage. A helper got stuck between clearing and resetting, tray in both hands, nowhere clear to set it down. 2 tables waited longer than promised, and a regular customer asked Louisa, not gently, whether the traveler party had swallowed the whole room. Louisa had seconds, not minutes, to decide. Samuel found the choke point in seconds, not with a list in his head, but the way a man reads a room he's finally learned by heart. He pulled one helper off carrying and put her straight onto clearing. Held the next seating back 3 full minutes so the clean ware could catch up, and told Louisa exactly how much delay he could honestly recover. So her promise to the front room would mean something when she made it. The backlog stopped growing, then it started shrinking. In the middle of the worst of it, with dishes still stacking and Agnes calling something from the kitchen, Louisa looked for him, not to check his work, just to see him. His cuff was damp to the elbow, his collar open at the throat, moving fast, not once looking rattled. For 1 second she forgot there was a room full of people waiting on either of them. She caught herself doing it, and turned back to the front before he noticed. The last traveler tables were served. The regulars hadn't been abandoned, just one honest apology owed for the delay, nothing worse. Samuel wasn't looking around the room for anyone's reaction. He was finishing his account, checking the last table's turn, same as any other night. Afterward, Edwin asked Samuel where a man learned to hold a service together under that kind of count. Samuel answered without shrinking it down the way he used to. Owen said, no hedging, that when Samuel's time at Bennett Eating House was finished, he wanted him to come talk about paid work. Separately, quietly, Ruth Whitcomb leaned toward Louisa as the room emptied and asked whether that man was married. An ordinary question, lightly asked the kind, put to any capable stranger passing through a small town. But Louisa felt it land somewhere she hadn't expected, sharper than she'd have guessed idle curiosity could land. The man who'd walked in less than 2 weeks earlier asking if anyone had work at all was now a man people had begun seeking out, and Louisa found she minded that more than she'd have predicted, an hour earlier, if anyone had asked her to. Later, once the room had quieted, Louisa watched Samuel finish the last of the count. There was no reason left to watch him. The night's work was done. She watched anyway. She found herself picturing him working for Owen, eating supper somewhere else in Shoshone, known to people who had nothing to do with her restaurant at all. A whole life continuing on, out past her own front door, whether she was part of it or not. She almost asked him, right then, what time he'd be back tomorrow. Then she remembered his trial was nearly finished, and there might not be a tomorrow that was any of her business at all. The next day, Louisa closed the account properly. She counted out every wage Samuel had earned through the whole arrangement, coin by coin onto the counter between them, and set the small book aside once the sum was right. No soft words about it, no talk of him having earned more than money could cover. She thanked him for the work, simply, and he took what he'd earned the same way, folding it away without counting it back. The small room stayed his through the time already agreed. He began, with part of his pay, asking after a room of his own elsewhere in town. A few days on, Samuel sat down with Owen Morrow. The offer was paid work keeping supply records and receiving straight for Owen's freight business. Samuel asked his terms the same way he always had. Wage, duties, start date, who held final say. Then he accepted because the work was real, and it finally met him at the level he actually knew. He arranged a simple room of his own, away from Bennett Eating House, ready for when the staff room's time ran out. He came back to tell Louisa himself. The new work, the new lodging, the day he'd clear the small room. She was glad for him, honestly glad. It cost her something to hear it that cleanly, precisely because she no longer had any claim on him at all. The days after that ran on two separate tracks. Samuel started at Owen's. Louisa kept running her restaurant, and a follow-up inquiry from the traveler party's supper proved the growth she'd hoped for was real. Neither of their futures needed the other to hold together anymore. One evening after closing, with the late summer light going gold across the street, Louisa saw Samuel outside the mercantile and called his name before she could think of a practical reason not to. Would you walk with me before the light goes?" Samuel understood exactly what she was asking. He said yes. As they started walking, he took his hat off. The same motion from the day he'd first come through her door. Louisa noticed. She didn't say so. They walked and talked about ordinary things, nothing dressed up for the occasion. He asked where she'd grown up, and she told him. A smaller town, further south, nothing like Shoshone. She asked if he'd ever thought about settling anywhere in particular. Before all this, and he admitted he hadn't let himself think that far ahead in years. After a while, Samuel asked whether she'd thought him trouble the first day he came through her door. "Tired," Louisa said. "That wasn't what I asked. A little trouble then." He smiled, and she did too. It was, Louisa thought, the simplest conversation she'd had in months, and somehow the one she'd remember longest. Near the end of it, Samuel asked whether he might see her again, on his next free evening. Yes, Louisa said, the same way she said most things. Without ceremony, already turning back toward the lit windows of her own restaurant, a woman with a place of her own and, now, somewhere else she wanted to be too. Shoshone was a real railroad town in Idaho Territory in 1888. Louisa Bennett, Samuel Reed, Bennett Eating House, and the events of this story are fictional. The narration and imagery were created with AI. Samuel arrived asking for almost nothing, and by the end of the restaurant's busiest night, the whole shape of his future had changed. Which moment made you see him differently? Tell me below, and subscribe to Wild West Stories for another original frontier romance. Thank you for spending this evening in Shoshone with Louisa and